plug into the system. When you are building your organization, you were probably one of the people who actually had a look at risks to the organization in a number of ways. But you probably thought about all of these digital components and thought that's way too hard. The only areas we need to worry about are the parts that we're going to use. So we needed to come up with a way of diagnosing or making those risks noticeable so we can actually understand. Once we understand the risks, we can then mitigate them. The second one is we need to have policies and procedures and processes in place that actually then address some of those risks or address the capability of the organization. But it's no use putting in policies and procedures if they're not part of the culture of the organization. So you're now going to have to worry about how that environment is going to be managed properly and how the standards of the organization can convey the policies and procedures that the organization needs. The third component is we need to teach people. We need to educate people to a level where they actually start understanding that security is really important to make sure that they have a job in 6 months' time. Because the moment you get hacked, then there are monumental problems, whether it's your product, if it's your organizations, your database, anything along those lines, then creates a problem for you. You also got to understand that it's no use just throwing pieces of technology at it without thinking about what that technology is. So we need the right technology in the right place, being utilized better than best practice. And I emphasize better than best practice. Best practice is the system, but you also need to understand how the system works, what it is doing. Number 5, we need to build resilience into the organization. We have to have business continuity. You have to have disaster recovery. You've got to have resilience in that background that allows the system to bounce back and be back to where we started from in as little time as possible. But we also need to worry about what the bad guys are doing. And when it comes to small and medium enterprises, most of those organizations have no way of tracking an attack inside an organization to the level that is really needed. And because of that, it then becomes a bit of a problem of how you protect the organization as much as possible. But also we need to understand that today's world, everything is changing. And because everything is changing, we have to have a security system in place that is going to protect the organization no matter how much new stuff you plug into it at any one time. You need to be able to stand back from the organization and go, okay, we're going to plug in X. What are the risks to the organization? Do we need policies around that organization? Do we need to protect it by teaching everybody how to use it properly? All of these questions need to come into building this pervasive process around security in the business itself. So today we're going to have a quick look at a number of things. The first one is, who the hell are the enemy? And we often think that, we're in an organization that hasn't got any enemies. They're not going to target us. All of those type of wonderful profanities that come up and say, okay, we're not going to be a target. We have to look at the issues relating to business security and actually understand what is actually going on. We also need to change our thinking. Now, changing our thinking means that we are not going to be, it's not going to happen to us, but now we're prepared for it happening to us. We need to have a pervasive process that's inside the business that allows us to make all those changes that are needed to make sure that we are always thinking security, even if it's only a low-level thought that these security requirements are needed. And we need to know where to from here. Okay, what are your steps going to be to actually get to the next level? So when it comes to drivers for markets and products and services, there are a number of things we need to put in that come to mind when we think about, I have a new product and this is what I wanted to do, and we're going to capture the market in that area. So the first one is first to market. We all know how important that is if I'm developing a product or I'm developing a service. I have to be the first person out there that has this product. And in most cases, the moment you say first to market, security goes from maybe in the middle out the door. Okay, first to market is really important, but so is security. The second one is cost to sales. Okay, we're going to develop this kick-ass system that's going to do everything that we want it to do, but it's now going to cost us 10 times more than we actually anticipated. How do we bring the cost down? How do we make the product more viable? value for money. And then we all know that people are so driven by how much is it going to cost, that value for money is really important. It may cost a little bit more as long as you are delivering something that's actually going to do what they want it to do. And the last one is we have to look at innovation. Okay, is what we're developing innovative enough to disrupt business itself? Now, if you think of what happened with the smartphone in 2008 and the introduction of social media in 2014, then you know that there are some significant components with having that capability of disrupting business itself. Everybody now uses a smartphone. Everybody now uses smart devices. Everybody now uses social media for whatever it is, sales, marketing, any of those components. So what are the barriers to actually improving or creating a problem? The first one is, how do we manage the risk? A new widget comes out. What are the risks to my organization going to actually be? That decision literally means, how are we going to address that? Now, you can address that as, let's put this product out there. These are the risks. We need to actually address those risks and make sure that they are not going to be a problem. Second one is compliance. Compliance and governance, GDPR, SHIELD in America, the Australian privacy regulations, the Singapore private regulations. What components of privacy is this widget that we're making? Is it going to have a problem with those, or do we need to address those in any way while we're building it? And the third one is security in itself. How do I make sure that someone can't hack my system, or someone can't steal the data off my system, or someone can't get into it and cause me major problems? Someone can't get in there and encrypt the data and make it hard for me or the person who's bought this product to actually do or have access to that information. So before we go through this system, we need to actually understand who the enemy are. Now, there's a hierarchy of bad guys, and this hierarchy literally starts at the 12 and 13-year-olds. Now, what we call script kiddies literally ranges from the 13-year-old in school all the way through to the 27-year-old who's just finished university. Now, these are the people who are testing. They are learning. They are trying. They are understanding how the digital world works. They're understanding how the protocols work and the ports and the IP addresses and everything along those lines to make themselves a better hacker, or they're going to go into the industry and they're going to be better at their job anyway. The second one is what we call hacktivists. Now, these are a lot more focused, a lot more driven, but they're issue driven. Things like Black Lives Matter, deaths in custody, climate change, anything that actually activates them to a point where they're going to actually target you because you are doing something that they perceive as being evil. The third one, criminal gangs. Huge problem. And the reason why we've now got criminal gangs and why we're actually starting to really worry about them in the digital world is they have the money, they have the capability, and they have the resources to actually cause us major problems. In addition to that, we also have the collectives, shadow brokers, anonymous, the rock stars of our enemy, because these are the people that other people, the script kiddies, are following. And because of that, that makes it very, very difficult. And the last one is the nation states. Now, the nation states literally are those high-level espionage tools. We saw one in 2005 called Stuxnet, and we saw a new one that came out of Russia in 2019 called Titan. Now, both of those were designed to disrupt nations, and that's hugely important when it comes to how we protect the systems that we actually have out there. If you are a target of a nation-state hacker, then you have got some major problems, but you also got a resource that they think is important, and that's a problem in itself. So we have to start thinking about how we protect ourselves. So when it comes to script kiddies, the first thing we think about is the pimply little kid, 14-year-old who's hacking into the school. Well, when it comes to how the script kiddies are actually learning, they don't actually need access to things like the dark web. They have the same things that we have access to, Google. So if I do a search on Google for just a couple of these ideas, so if I go hacking Wi-Fi, 219 million results, hacking Windows, $84 million results. Eternal Blue. Now, Eternal Blue is not only a hack, but it's an actual system that was set up or created a long time ago, like about 3-4 years ago. It's where WannaCry, Pattaya, non-Pattaya came from. 271 million results. Okay, they don't need access to the dark web to become a problem for us. Now, the other side of it is the digital criminal. And when it comes to talking about digital criminals, they are now running their organizations as a business. And because they are doing that, they have competition and collaboration between gangs. They have the capability of actually saying, well, we haven't got the resources, so let's have a partnership because you have access to things like web hosting or a botnet or a zombie network or a malware development kit that actually creates something I can use. So the bad guys then come together as a collaboration. They're talking on things very similar to teams. So they come up with ideas. They come up with how we're going to tie it all together. We put all the right bits in place, and then we need something like an operations manager to make it all work together. We also need to know that there's a hell of a lot of automation out there, and that automation then creates additional problems because it means that the people down here, those random attacks that happen across the board every single day, is now part of their attack process. And we want to stop the random attacks as much as possible. There's also, they have the capability of actually researching development. It's no use for them to create a kick-ass malware development kit only to have it become obsolete in 3 months. So they've got to put in the research. They've got to find new 0 days. They've got to find new capabilities that allow them to access these systems. And we need to look at marketing. And we know that they use marketing because we've seen it already. Marketing, for instance, comes down to, we know that you contacted us. This is some of the information that we have. Sales, you bought something from us. You can now buy something for 50% off. All of these parts of a normal business are being developed by the bad guys as well. The last one is support. And we probably don't think much about this, but if I go and buy a malware development kit and I can't get it to write my malware properly, or it doesn't encode it or it doesn't encrypt it properly, I can actually jump on the phone, I can send an email, or I can actually ask them to remote into my system to fix my problem. Now, we've never had this. This has only been around for the last 2 years, maybe 3 years. Because the digital criminal, when they're running a business, we are talking millions and millions of dollars. And because of that, money makes them be able to capability. We've also had the introduction of, or some of the news articles that have come about in the last couple of weeks about artificial intelligence being deployed by the bad guys because they have the money to invest in that type of thing. So we're going to end up with artificial intelligence developing new malware, finding new 0-day exploits, and these type of things. So we have to keep ahead of the curve. So what's the difference between the good guys and the bad guys? Well, to me, there's only one difference, and that is communication. Now, communication, the bad guys talk, okay? If they will create a how-to, they will develop, they'll write a proof of concept, they'll develop a video, they'll run a podcast, they'll tell everybody what they are doing. And think about kids in the schoolyard, they're bragging about it. They're telling everybody that this is happening. So by doing that, people then come up and say, well, how did you do that? Tell me how you did whatever you did, okay? And show me how you did it, okay? Because they're quite proud of having that capability of allowing them to do that. The problem with the good guys is we can't do that because there's social, there's reputational, there's legal risks. And because of those, if it's discovered that you have an organization that has been hacked, then things like your stock price will drop by anywhere between 5 and 15%. And now you've got a major problem. Not only are you fighting a cybercrime attack, but you are now facing a financial loss that is going to impact everything you do. So when it comes to discovering a hack, most of the people in organizations try to keep it as quiet as possible to stop it from happening and getting out into the real world. And that communication component is really, really interesting when it comes to how do we actually manage an attack when it comes to a normal organization. So let's have a quick look at what the bad guys have actually done. So from the beginning of time to the Greek and Roman empires, it was one group against one group. It was one-on-one. It was you had something I wanted, I'm going to steal it, or you have land, I'm going to invade. So this one-on-one environment allowed them to actually happen. So the only time you had an advantage was when you had more of your people against less of their people. So we had this understanding that things were going to happen. The second time we actually see this was from about 400 BC all the way through to the digital world. We had the introduction of banks. So I guarantee the first bank that went in, there was someone in that area that went, okay, all the money's in one place, let's go and rob it. Okay, so we now have one against many. Okay, one person can steal from a couple of thousand. In 2014, when Target was hacked, there was a group of about 20 key people who stole from 34 million. So we've seen this huge escalation in what the digital world can actually do to crime in itself. But when it comes to crime, you have to think about what the crimes are involved in. So when it comes to normal crime, we have motive, we have means, and we have opportunity. Okay, I have to have the motive. I have to have the reason why I'm going to steal something or kill someone or do something I'm not supposed to do. I have to have the means to be able to do it. I have to know how a gun works, or I've got to know how burglary tools work, or I need to understand how I can get into a place by actually doing some research or that type of thing. And I have to have the opportunity to be able to do it. I have to live next door to someone. I have to be in the same area. Now take that out of the real world and put it into the digital world. We've got a couple of 100 million hackers out there. We have a device that is connected to the internet. Okay, whether that's a mobile phone, whether it's a computer, maybe it's a system that allows me to do whatever I need to do. But in the actual back end of it, it connects to the internet. So the hackers have an opportunity to target you. They have the motive. You have a number of things that they want. You have certain things that they find quite a requirement to actually get off you. And they have the means. They have the capability of doing a search on the internet and go, hacking PDF. Okay, off you go. It's done. I have now a problem. And because I have a device that is connected to the internet, that all of these people who have means, motive, and opportunity to target this device, we have to make some serious decisions about how we protect our information. Now, what do we mean by information? So why you? Why would I target you? And it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter why I'm targeting you, but you have 4 facets that actually make you a lucrative target, even though you don't think about it. The first one is you have access to money. And that money can be in Bitcoin, it can be in your bank account, it can be in PayPal, anything along those lines literally means that we are now able to target that. You might even have money in a game, for instance. The bad guys are still going to target it. The second one is intellectual property, trade secrets, capabilities of how your organization works. Personal identifiable information. You have access to not only yours, because yours information is rather important, but clients, staff, business information. That is all stuff that they can use to target someone else. If they can steal that information and say it came from you, then they have a trusted relationship in that correspondence, and they have a better chance of that person you've been targeted, that they're targeted, of actually doing something as well. So I have this flow-on effect. And if everything else goes out of the window and you don't have money on your device and you don't have intellectual property and you don't have PII, they will use your system to leapfrog and attack someone else. By doing that, they're hiding what they're doing. And by doing that, you are now in a problematic situation for the simple fact that that is actually happening as well. So why are you listening to me? Well, my name is Roger. I am an author. I am a speaker. I'm an educator. I am an industry fellow for the University of New South Wales, where I teach undergrads not only how to hack, but how to protect themselves. And I also run a couple of businesses. Now, when it comes to business security, I love this stuff, because I see an opportunity where if we do the right thing, we can stop these people in their tracks. But doing the right thing is the hardest part that we have to worry about. So what are the issues that are related to business security and the systems that we have out there that we actually plug our lives into all the time? Well, there's a quote from a TED talk a couple of years ago. Everything has vulnerabilities. Now, everything has vulnerabilities for the simple fact they are created by humans. Doesn't matter what they are, doesn't matter what's in place. They are part of the human world, which means that we have probably infested it with vulnerabilities. Those vulnerabilities, no matter how small, can be exploited and cause us major problems. When it comes to being security in itself, we need to change our minds from reactive to proactive. Okay, I've been targeted by a hacker. Okay, I'm going to react. We don't want to do that. We want to see that the hacker is actually targeting us. We want to make decisions based on the information coming into our system. That is proactivity. And we need to start thinking about that in such a way that it's now a better way of doing business security for itself. We have to do something. And it doesn't matter what that do is, as long as you start actually putting things in place. And we have to start somewhere. And one of the big problems we have when it comes to small and medium enterprises and not-for-profit organizations is when you walk in and say, you need to start somewhere, the first question is, where do we start? Okay, it doesn't matter. Okay, you have to start somewhere. The moment you start somewhere, then you are going to start building up an environment that is going to be more secure and more mature and allow you to actually do your business. Now, there's also a thing called security by obscurity. Okay, now this can come in code. For instance, I'm writing a piece of code and I've borrowed something off GitHub. I put it into my system, into my piece of software. And yes, this does happen. I put it into my software. I'm now claiming it is mine, but that software has got vulnerabilities in it. Okay, I've now plugged it into my system. I've transferred the vulnerabilities from that system into my system. And even though I may not be using it as part of the program, it still can be targeted as a vulnerability, and that then makes it downside dangerous. And because of that, okay, if I have that in there, I think, well, I won't remove it because it's not a target, it's obscured, you can't see it. There was also a thing about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, where we used to build websites. And instead of using the normal ports of port 80 and port 443, we used 79. Okay, now I could put it up there. I know how to get to it. It's a website that's sitting there doing what I wanted to do. Nobody else knows about it because the browser only opens up port 80 and port 443. But with today's development and attack profiles and attack systems that are available, I can scan the IP address and go, that's a website, it's on port 79, and I can now target it because you're going to tell me exactly what is there. It's on a Linux system, it's running Apache, it's got Tomcat in it, all of that then comes out literally like reading a book. It's really, really easy, and that makes security by obscurity something that is not a good idea in today's world. And we also have to understand what the risks are to the organization using digital devices. Okay, how can we, the process that we use, we literally ask 150 questions. This is your system. What happens if this goes down? We don't actually ask from the top down. We come from the bottom up as well. Okay, how many times do you, or how many people in your organization are doing a really critical job, but management and middle management don't really know how they actually work? Okay, that needs to be investigated. The risks to the organization needs to be addressed, and we can then address it and mitigate it properly by saying, well, they're using an application that we had no idea they were using to this level. We need to start making sure that it's backed up. It has all the right systems in place. It's as protected as possible. We need to train people how to use it. All of these things then become a part of how we secure an organization. We have to change our thinking. Okay, now one of the things about development and R&D is we need to actually understand the underlying systems. Now, there is a system that was developed by the Australian Signals Directorate in 2014 it was called the Top 4, but it's now become the Essential 8. Now, these are the Essential 8 strategies that everybody should be applying. It doesn't matter who you are. Some of them are hard to apply personally, but they should be applied as much as possible. Now, those essential 8 are: you need to patch your operating systems. Every time the operating system comes up and says, I need to update, do it. It doesn't have to be then, but it needs to be done in a fastest way possible. Patch your applications. All of these applications that we have on our system are vulnerable in some way. The people who manufacture them know that. They'll release a patch that closes down a vulnerability. Privileged users. You know, that first user on a system, whether it's an application, whether it's an operating system, that first user, that is the administrator. And that's all it's for, is administrating that system. Okay, you now delegate all of the other capabilities to everybody else, but you only keep that administrator or a number of administrators to that level. Using whitelisting. If I have a list of applications that can only work in my environment, then any piece of malware that gets into it is not on that whitelist. So it's not going to actually function to the level it needs to do. We need to actually harden our systems as much as possible. Take all those information out of it to stop it from being a target of a vulnerability. We've got to manage macros. Now, macros are just scripting in some way. So we need to have that process in place that signs the macros, that allows only signed macros to work. That is then securing the organization. And the last part is we need to back up the system as much as possible. What data is held? Where is it held? All of these components are really important when it comes to protecting an organization. So those 8 components, now there are times when we can actually flip them around. Now, the 8 components, the essential eight strategies, take you from down here in the mud and the mire of the digital world and put you halfway up the tree. Okay, you're no longer going to be a target of a random attack, because that random attack is using a malware that's been developed from 12 months ago. It's going to hit your system. Some idiot in your organization has clicked on a link or opened up an application. The malware that targets a vulnerability is no longer there because the vulnerability has been patched. So it literally bounces off your system. So again, it takes you from down here in the mire to halfway up the tree. And that's where you want to be. You need to be in that halfway space. So when it comes to development of systems, we actually now have to have the ability to patch it as much as possible. You develop a piece of software, you are also liable to actually come up with ways of making sure that it can't be hacked. Okay, so you've got to find vulnerabilities. You've got to look at the code and work out, okay, I've done something here. I need to change it. I need to make it a lot better. The best thing you can also have is two-factor authentication. Now, two-factor authentication, something you are, so they username, password, and something else. Now, what this does is username and password are relatively easy now to capture, whether it's a credential capture pop-up that comes up or someone has hacked into some unsuspecting system that is now delivered password, username, and combination. We need to have that third part. So if someone does get the first two, they still can't get in because they haven't got that third part component. It must be hardened. Going back to what I was talking about with applications, we developed an application, we use stuff off GitHub, we plugged it into our system. We are then changing our focus. We think that it's not important. We're not going to worry about it. We are now going to not use that piece of code, but we'll leave it in the application. Don't take it out. Okay, if it's not going to be used, and even Microsoft has now developed systems where they have something in the operating system or an application, they go, well, that was a feature that we had, we're not going to use it, they now remove it. Okay, they don't want someone to be able to activate that feature because it has a vulnerability. You must have the ability to back up the system in some way, backing up the data, backing up its configuration, and the configuration is just as important. Okay, especially with some systems that are really, really unique to the people who are using it. I need to be able to go, I'm going to back up the configuration. Everything goes to pear-shaped. I want to be able to put the data into the system, put my configuration into a system, and have all my systems in place that I can actually access and do whatever I need to do. And the last one is we need to add a reduced number of administrators. If you have a website that you only need 2 people to post to, those 2 people are the only people who have posting capability. If they don't need access to that information, why give it to them? And this comes down to administrators across the board. Okay, you have an administrator. We've been to places where there've been 10 people on staff and they've had 15 people who are administrators. Okay, huge problem, because it means that any attack comes in at the administrator level, not at the user level. And to get from a user to an administrator is a fairly complex process, and it's usually out of the real realms of 90% of the hackers out there, because they haven't got the capability, they haven't got the time, they haven't got the understanding of actually moving it and getting it to the next level. So they have hacked the system as a user, which means they have already got reduced capabilities on the system as well. Okay, the other thing about it is, if we are collecting personal identifiable information or privacy information, we need to make some decisions about how we protect the components that we're putting together. Now, if you haven't heard about it, there was an attack in 2016 called Mirai. Now, Mirai went across the internet. It targeted organizations or systems, especially IoT systems, that had a default username and password that could not be changed. Okay, now, when it was first released, Mirai infected 400,000 Internet of Things devices in 24 hours. It was literally an automated process that went out and checked all of these IP addresses on the internet, literally targeted them with a specific FTP or secure FTP request that said, try these usernames and passwords, and if we get in, it goes into another database that we can then record. That second database was then used to target them properly. Okay, these are the things that the bad guys are really capable of, because those systems are out there. Because nobody thought that having a default username and password or having a hard-coded username and password would create a problem, until it created a problem. And those are that's the thinking that we have to get past. Going back to what I said, vulnerabilities in everything. Everything has a vulnerability in some way. And the more the vulnerability is there, the easier it is to target. So we need to make sure that default usernames and passwords can be changed. Even better, don't have one. In other words, you run up your application, you install whatever you need to do, you open up your computer. The first thing it's going to ask you is create a username, and then it's going to go create a password. Okay, now the second part of that is we need complex passwords. Now, there are still systems out there that have access or only allow access using letters and numbers. Okay, when we come to what the bad guys are capable of, not a good concept. Okay, so anything that's on a keyboard should be part of a password, and it should be able to accept passwords that are bigger than 10 characters. So, and again, we are looking at securing that information as much as possible. All data that are accessed from the system needs to be encrypted as much as possible. Now, that's it's possible now to encrypt tables. It's possible to encrypt information that's available. It's possible to do a lot of things with encryption nowadays. When it comes to encryption, do not write your own. Okay, the number of people who have written their own only to embed their own vulnerabilities in the system is phenomenal. Okay, use the ones that are out there: PGP, SSL, TLS, anything along those lines that allows us to have a secure environment. And because we are talking about incorporating all of these ideas into a secure business environment, we have to start thinking about how do we add it to the system without making it a burden on the organization. So making it a pervasive process, we need to actually start looking at what are we doing with the keys? Are they on the system? Are they off the system? Are they in a totally isolated location? Now, your keys are your encryption. If you lose your keys in a hack that actually has someone steal the information and the keys, you might as well have not had it encrypted in the first place anyway. So the encryption process needs those keys. Once it's done, you take them off, you put it into another environment, literally burn it on a CD and stick it in a safe is probably the best way you can do it. But once you've done that, then you know where the private keys are and the public keys are, and that component of it. Change our attitude. We need to change our attitude from "it will not happen to me" to be prepared for it. Okay, if I'm prepared for an attack, I am then going to be in a situation where I'm going to make really, really interesting decisions about how I'm going to protect my system as much as possible. And we need to embed security into the actual fabric of the organization. Okay, if everybody is thinking about it, then there's a very good chance that security will be front of mind. People will then start thinking, oh, that's not a good thing to do. We need to change that. And that's also part of the education process. If you can gamify education and make it competitive in a good way, not in a bad way, but you will find an increase of tenfold in security around your organization, because everybody is now pulling towards a common cause. And that common cause is, let's not get hacked. Okay, if you can do that, then the organization is going to be a lot more stable, it's going to be a lot better protected, and everybody is now thinking about, how do I protect my little part of the organization? And that literally, when you gamify it along the lines of, and this is, we've had this happen a number of times, when they have a competition in the office to see who gets spam and who can then identify it as a phishing attack. Okay, it literally comes through. Someone will get a Australian Post. Okay, we'll get an Australian Post email that says you've got look what I got. Okay, that's what you want to do. You want to make it so that people are now focused on the problem. And the more that people talk about it, the more it becomes front of mind. And the last one is, use the basic principles of people, which is education, policies, which is policies, procedures, processes, plans, and standards, and technology to actually start increasing the security around your organization. Now, when it comes to risk, we use all three of those to mitigate the risk as much as possible. And if we start mitigating the risk, we are then going to be in a better situation. And finally, okay, when it comes to security, think outside the box. Now, most of us are very, very insular when we think about security. And we often revert back to, it won't happen to me, we have nothing worth stealing, and we are too small to be a target. Okay, those three are really, really bad thinking, because to change that, all we have to do is be prepared. And if we're prepared, then we are going to protect the stuff around it. The second one is build awareness. Make it as I said, gamify, competition, anything along those lines, so people are going to actually look at it and go, my computer's playing up, I wonder what's wrong with it. Okay, and again, this is ways of protecting the organization as much as possible. We are all looking, most of the time we are not going to get targeted by a criminal gang, and we're not going to get targeted by a nation state. But if they targeted you, it's like confronting a black belt ninja in your driveway. If they want to come in, they're going to come in. But those other groups, that 90% of the people, the script kiddies and the hacktivists, if we've done all the right things, then the very good chance that we are not going to be targeted in our environment. So we've lifted our security envelope. We've made it harder for these people to get in. The random attacks are having no effect because we've put all that essential 8 components in, and that then creates a lot more secure environment. So if we can make this an environment that is pervasive in how we manage security, then we are going to be in a better place. All right, thank you. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all of those type of things. Thank you very much. Over to you, Rachel, Akshay. Are there any questions? Ooh. All right, anonymous.
If you can answer questions.
Sorry?
There are some questions in the Q&A. If you can.
Yeah, I'm just looking at them now. New ways of managing. If you actually develop this security environment that it actually allows people to actually discuss security, which is one of the biggest problems we got. We don't like discussing security. The only thing that usually gets force-fed or forced down our throats is you've got to be secure. Don't open that spam. Don't open that phishing email. But when it comes to fraud, there are so many ways that you can actually cause a problem. Going back to what I do with ADFA, the University of New South Wales, we have a process that actually shows you that simple box that pops up on a web page that is credential stealing is really, really easy to do. So when it comes to understanding how these things are available, you have to start talking about how if you see something unusual, do something about it, or don't accept the bait. One of the things we are trying to get people to do is go back to your point of truth. Okay, if a pop-up comes up from Facebook saying it's disconnected from Facebook, put in your credentials here, shut down that browser and go to Facebook. If it runs up, you know that was bullshit. Okay, these are the things that you need to talk about. Risks from new work with home trends. Some of the risks that we're seeing, we're already seeing problems with things like Google's Amazon's Alexa, Google Home, all of these things that are feeding into their systems. Okay, now the other thing about Google and the capability is everything that you do on Facebook, on Google, is being fed into the system. You go to a website with a Facebook icon on it and you have a Facebook account, it records that you have been there. Okay, so all of this information is really starting to funnel into these systems. And it literally comes down to how they target us. When it comes to home trends, home systems, that wonderful piece of social media stuff that we've got is totally different from everybody else on the planet. And that then becomes a capability for someone to actually feed information directly to me that then causes a problem. Most of the time when it comes to big frauds, they are done by organizations. Tanvir, it's outside the capability. No, I won't say that. It's probably outside the capability of a single person, because not only are the big frauds happening, but we need to have a process of getting the money out of the system, getting it in such a way that we can now take it away from wherever we've put it and put it into another system. Now, you can't do that unless you've got a large organization behind you. Manipulating a bank account, getting the money, transferring the money into another bank account, we still have a digital trace. Okay. Now, if I walk into that bank and take $10,000 out in cash and now walk into another bank down the road and put it into another bank account, I've just cleaned that money. There's no way that we can track that money because we now have that separation because of the bank capabilities. So to me, the chances of big fraud happening on their own, very, very remote. You'd have to be very, very clever and have the capability of doing a large number of things as well. Most of the time, people haven't got that capability. And James Green. Yeah, the hack that happened on Twitter in July this year highlighted one of the things that we have been talking about significantly, and that is the insider threat. Okay, the hack happened because someone on the inside had access to those accounts. They actually then manipulated those accounts to send out those tweets that said, send us 1 Bitcoin and we'll send you back 2. When it comes to understanding what the bad guys are or what they're doing, anything that comes through that says free money, bad idea. Okay, most of the times you'll see it on Twitter, you'll see it on Facebook, you'll see it even on Google sometimes. If you do this, if you do X, we'll give you X dollars back. It's just another scheme for getting people to do the wrong thing. And if you focus on that, as I said, always go back to your point of truth, then you have a better understanding. You are going to be better protected. If someone turns around to me and says, if you give me $1, I'm going to give you $2 back, I am going to be exceedingly dubious about it. And that's how you have to think about it, because it is really easy to compromise people at that level. Because if you can do that, then you have just made $1. Okay, and $1 is really good. A Bitcoin, which is about $1,700 a coin, no, $17,000 a coin, at least that's what it was. That's a huge investment. Oh, look, I'm going to give you one and you're going to give me two. How about you give me two and I'll give you one back? Okay. To me, that's a better way of doing it. And you have to think of these things as well. And that's literally what you have to do. So any more Q&A questions? Nobody? Oh.
I have a question for you. Like,
okay.
Nowadays, we are using more smart speakers and smart gadgets in our homes. So how can we rest assured that our personal data has not been leaked to any of the hackers or that kind?
It's very hard. They are designed to actually always be listening. We did an experiment at University of New South Wales last year on a Google Home. Literally, we had a group of people sitting around a table. We talked about something that we never normally talked about, what flavor of pizza we were going to get. And the person whose account we used on that system started getting adverts for pizza. It showed how that information was manipulated, and it also showed that these type of problems are something that we have to start addressing right now. It's the same as facial recognition, artificial intelligence, drones, robots. If we don't start addressing those problems right now, then in 2-3 years' time, it's going to be way too late. Okay, and we have to start thinking about technology is great. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a technophobe, but I see a lot of I see a lot of things with what's happening in the real world through a different lens than a lot of people. I don't see the convenience. I see how can I hack that, and if I can hack that, how can someone else hack it? Okay, and that's one of my problems is I don't see the technology for what the technology can do. I see a technology that I can actually use to exploit someone else. And to me, it's a different way of looking at it. Most people, going back to what happened with first to market environments and all these innovations that we keep coming up with, most of them are, let's get it in front of people, let's get them using it, so they're all going to be willing to use it, only to realize that what they're doing with that system is outside the scope of what it was actually designed to do. And some of those problems we have to start addressing now.
I guess as we progress towards more advanced technologies, there will be more advanced cybersecurity laws in place.
Yes, yeah. I don't know about laws because governments seem to be about 3 or 4 years behind everything. Even if you think about what's happening in America right now with what happened with Facebook and getting in front of Congress and all that sort of stuff. They had a great idea about discussing some of the problems, but there was no solutions to any of those problems that came out. Yes, we can change it so that the responsibility now falls on the organization. Okay, so the Shield the Shield Act that just came out recently from America, where if you don't do something, it's your fault. That puts all of the onus back on the organization. It doesn't say that if you've got a shitty piece of software that's on a computer, that it's the person who wrote that responsibility software, not the person who's using it. And when we change that around, people will then start taking responsibility for the stuff they're releasing to the public. Different way of looking at it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Roger, for sharing so much valuable information with us.
No worries. Anytime. If you have a question, jump on the social media. I'll get on there. I'll talk to you anytime.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Arshay.